Richard Everhart, a self-made millionaire, is deeply in love with his fiancée, Emily Donovan. But as their wedding day approaches, he begins to worry: does Emily truly love him for who he is, or for his wealth? He makes a bold and life-altering decision to test her and her family's true intentions. Richard pretends to lose everything and takes a low-paying job at a McDonald's. However, what he experiences at the hands of Emily's family is more shocking than he ever could have imagined. Richard Everhart wasn't born into money. Raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to support him, Richard learned early on the value of hard work. He started his first business at the age of 19, a small tech company that grew rapidly due to his innovative ideas and dedication. By the time he was 30, he was a millionaire, living in luxury, and enjoying the fruits of his labor. Yet, despite his success, Richard remained humble. His wealth never defined him, but it did affect the people around him. He became accustomed to being admired, respected, and even envied. Over time, however, he noticed something troubling: many people seemed to love him more for his money than for his character. It was during a business event that he met Emily Donovan, a beautiful woman with a kind smile and infectious laugh. Emily was everything Richard thought he wanted in a partner: charming, caring, and always by his side. Within a year of dating, Richard proposed, and Emily joyously accepted. However, as their wedding day drew closer, Richard couldn't shake the nagging doubt in his mind: did Emily truly love him for who he was? Or was she, like many others, attracted to his fortune? His suspicions deepened after meeting Emily's family. They were well off but not nearly as wealthy as Richard. Her father, Mr. Donovan, a strict and shrewd businessman, often asked Richard about his finances and investments. Her mother, Mrs. Donovan, seemed more concerned with Emily's lavish future lifestyle than with their relationship. Her brother, James, seemed disinterested in Richard unless he was asking for business advice. As Emily's family discussed wedding plans that sounded more like business mergers than celebrations of love, Richard decided he needed to know the truth. A plan began to form in his mind, one that would allow him to see who truly valued him for who he was, and not for what he had. Richard decided to fake a financial downfall. He began by calling off a few business deals and publicly announcing a series of investment losses. The news spread like wildfire, and within weeks, the media reported that the once invincible Richard Everhart had lost nearly everything. He approached Emily and her family with the news, carefully watching their reactions. Emily was visibly shaken, but she assured him that everything would be all right. "We don't need money to be happy," she said, her voice trembling slightly. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that Richard couldn't ignore. Her father, however, was less comforting. "This is unexpected," Mr. Donovan said, frowning. "You've always been so stable. How could this happen?" "It's just a temporary setback," Richard replied calmly, "but it means the wedding plans will have to be scaled back. No extravagant venues, no designer dresses, just a simple ceremony." Mrs. Donovan was visibly distressed. "A simple ceremony?" she gasped. "But what about the guests? What will people say?" Emily forced a smile, but it was clear she was struggling to hide her disappointment. "As long as we're together, that's all that matters," she said, though her words rang hollow in Richard's ears. This was the first test. Richard had hoped for reassurance and unconditional support, but what he got was hesitation and worry about appearances. Still, it wasn't enough for him to make any conclusions. He needed more. To push his plan further, Richard took the drastic step of getting a job at a local McDonald's. He wanted to see how Emily's family would treat him when he wasn't a millionaire anymore, when he was just an ordinary man struggling to make ends meet. At first, Emily was supportive, or at least she pretended to be. "It's just temporary," she would say, though she rarely visited him at the McDonald's, nor did she seem interested in his new life. But the real test came when Emily's family found out. One evening, Richard was invited to dinner at the Donovans' home. He arrived in his McDonald's uniform, still smelling faintly of grease and French fries. Mr. Donovan's face tightened when he saw Richard's attire. "Is that what you're wearing to dinner?" Mr. Donovan asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "I came straight from work," Richard explained. "You should have changed," Mrs. Donovan added sharply. "This is hardly appropriate for a family dinner." Throughout the evening, Richard felt the sting of judgment in every comment, every sideways glance. James, Emily's brother, smirked when Richard mentioned his new job, making a snide remark about how flipping burgers must be quite the change from his previous life. Emily remained silent, offering no defense for Richard. It was clear that the Donovans no longer saw Richard. A few weeks later, Emily's family hosted a charity gala, one of the most anticipated events of the season. Richard, now fully immersed in his role as a struggling fast food worker, was not invited. However, he showed up unannounced. Dressed in his work uniform, Richard walked into the gala, turning heads as he entered the elegant ballroom. The room was filled with the city's elite, bankers, socialites, and business magnates. The air buzzed with polite conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. As soon as Mr. Donovan spotted Richard, his face turned a shade of crimson. He stormed over, dragging Richard aside. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "You're embarrassing us." "I wanted to support Emily," Richard said calmly. The next day, Richard invited Emily and her family to a meeting at his lawyer's office. The atmosphere was tense as they sat around a large conference table. Emily looked confused, while her parents were visibly annoyed. "Why are we here?" Mr. Donovan snapped. Richard smiled, though there was no warmth in his expression. "I wanted to clear something up," he said, pulling out a stack of papers from his briefcase. "You see, I never actually lost my fortune. I'm still a millionaire." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "It was all a test," Richard continued, his voice steady. "I wanted to see if you and your family loved me for who I am, or for my money. And I think I got my answer." Mrs. Donovan gasped, her face turning pale. You lied to us." Richard nodded. "Yes, I did. And now I know the truth. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of marrying into wealth. When I wasn't rich anymore, you treated me like garbage." Emily looked horrified, tears welling up in her eyes. "Richard, please, it's not like that. I love you." Richard shook his head. "If you loved me, it wouldn't have mattered that I was working at McDonald's. But it did matter. You couldn't even stand to be seen with me." Emily's family sat in stunned silence, realizing that their greed and shallow values had cost them everything. Richard walked out of the lawyer's office that day with a sense of clarity and peace. He knew now that true love wasn't about wealth or status, it was about standing by someone through thick and thin, no matter what life threw at them. He never looked back at Emily or her family. They had shown their true colors, and he had no interest in a future with people who valued money over love. In the weeks that followed, Richard returned to his life as a successful businessman, but this time, he was more cautious about who he let into his life. He knew that real connections weren't built on material wealth, but on trust, respect, and genuine affection. And as for Emily, she and her family faded into the background, just another chapter in Richard's journey, a reminder that not everything that glitters is gold. The end.